Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Frontline Advantage. I'm still under the weather, recovering, but not to worry. We've got another great guest today, Chad Gomes. Chad is someone I met when I was at Katzenbach Partners, which is a management consulting firm that focused on organizational performance combined with strategic insights and management. So, traditional consulting firm, but that also focused on the organizational components. Chad and I have stayed in touch over the years. He's done various types of things. Currently, he's working at Chad Gomes Consulting, where he helps companies with behavioral change, organizational performance, and more. I wanted to bring Chad onto this video podcast series because Chad has a number of stories and anecdotes he can share with us today around frontline performance, working with people on the front line, and different insights and nuggets that he's seen that others could benefit learning from today. So, Chad, welcome to the Frontline Advantage.
Thanks, buddy. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Why don't you just quickly start by sharing a brief background about yourself? I said a few words, but just for the audience.
Sure. I'll shortcut it to 2005 when I've been working for about, 25 years at that point. But since then, I've been in consulting, joining Katzenbach then, and John Katzenbach has been a mentor to me for many years, based both on the frontline performance stuff as well as team building, as he's written 4 books on that topic and a few on behavior change. Worked with John and the team at Katzenbach and then at Booz and Company when we were bought out through 2010. Then I went solo. And since then, my work primarily has been global, working in other countries, helping up teams of consultants learn some of our methodologies and best practices, sort of as a trainer of training, or a train the trainer model, I guess I would say, helping those teams get up to speed and learn how to do effective culture and behavior change and sort of connect the front line to the top of the organization and throughout. So,
tell us a little bit about your work doing that. So, behavior change, connecting the front line to the top of the organization. What are the typical pains or problems where they say, hey, Chad, can you come in and help us?
Yeah, so the work we did, it's interesting because the work we did at Katzenbach, we didn't think of ourselves as culture consultants, right? Or behavior change consultants. We were holistic. We worked on strategy, operating model, and culture all together. But we knew you need to if you're going to come up with a good strategy, you needed to think about what your culture was and what your culture was capable of before doing that and what they could implement. A lot of the work we ended up getting called for, though, was companies that came up with a great strategy on paper, right? And it's easy to come up with a great strategy, just put it on a slide. And then when they went to implement, things ground to a halt and they couldn't implement it. And then they said, our culture is getting in the way, which isn't exactly true. But then we'd get the call, like, who knows a lot about changing your culture? And they'd call us in and say, here's our new strategy. We need our culture to align with it. Fix the culture to work with our strategy, which is very hard to do. And we generally say, the number one thing in culture change is don't try to change your culture. So we don't work on changing the culture, but evolving it slowly based on focusing on a few behaviors, what we call critical behaviors, that if more people did them more of the time, it would make a big change, right? And those critical behaviors have to be connected to business priorities. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. It's like playing soccer with no goal. It's fun to kick the ball around, but eventually, you can't keep score of whether it's making a difference or not.
Can you share some stories of specific examples of this? We can kind of dive in a little bit more. And was this an environment? Were these environments that were the entire workforce being remote, sort of people behind desks, deskless, or when you're talking about culture and the front line, was it people sort of behind or in a manufacturing, a deskless environment? What were the environments like?
Sure. So, for this purpose, I'll focus more on the deskless because we've done both. And a lot of the companies that we work with are multinational companies or very large companies. So they have all sorts of workforces. But we have worked with a number of mines in the Middle East, a number of refineries and upstream oil, nationals. So we've had our teams out on oil, have to take helicopters out on oil rigs to talk to the groups there and have focus groups. We've done banks and, in like cash operations and stuff, they have desks, but nobody can have an email. Nobody can have access to communications that way and things like that. The issues with communication are both around what's coming from the top, the actual content, meaning is it transparent? Is it honest? Is it authentic? That's really important. People can sniff that out real fast. But then additionally, it's about communication up the chain and across the chain. Oftentimes, companies have no communication channel up the chain that's effective, and or they're not hearing it from the right people, or they just see it as complaints. And so that is a huge problem. And a lot of times, companies don't really want the communication up, to be honest with you. They're afraid of it, right? So they break that channel. And then a lot of times the communication is broken across. And so, I can share stories about for instance, the people who are really good at making the communication across get to know the people across one way or the other. So when we are having trouble with communications across at the front line, we do surveys and talk to people and say, who do you go to if you need help from another group that you're having trouble with, right? And we see this in, let's say, refineries all the time, right? So maintenance, operations, they'll have sort of fights with each other on things. And there would always be one or two guys who's the go-to to break through all that. And you say, why does everyone go to you? Oh, because I have a good relationship with those guys. How do you have a good relationship with those guys? Oh, I go to lunch with them. I have coffee with them. I've gotten to know everyone here. And when there's a new guy, I make sure I get to know him so that when I'm calling him up and asking him to do something he doesn't want to do, I'm not just some guy on the phone. And oftentimes these guys will say, and I don't call and I don't email. I walk over across the plant into his unit, bring him a cup of coffee and then talk to them. And so they get that you need to be personal, and people don't care what you want them. Don't give a crap about what you want them to do. So they know you give a crap about them. And that's true up and down the chain and across the chain. It's just human behavior exists in the workforce, right? And human emotion does. So we go to those guys, and when you ask them what we should do, they come up with stuff that seems very soft, like coffee chats across the organization, new person every week, give everyone a coffee card. And we bring this to leadership, and leadership says, this is a dumb idea, right? Oftentimes. And we say, you don't have to think it's a good idea. You're normally thinking about, I evaluate the ideas. I'm a critical thinker. If you guys were good at this would be solved. Right. So let's go to the people who are good at this, ask them what could be done to improvement, and then get out of the way. Unless there's a reason to say no. Is it too much money? Does it create some risks? If it doesn't have either of those elements in it, let them do it. And often it's self-fulfilling because the people who say it can work, and if they volunteer to help set it up and do it, they will make sure it works. Right. And so we've seen numerous times when then that creates way better communication across organization, especially frontline groups that are having trouble. Like we had in one refinery, the solution of what we call the motivators, or in this case, the connectors, the solution of them was to have the operations and the maintenance have breakfast together each day. Made a huge difference. So what was called sort of breakdown maintenance, or where you have to do maintenance immediately, went down, I want to say like 80%, because the maintenance guys knew about stuff in advance and would be like, oh, we should just fix that now, just because they were having breakfast with the operations guys who got comfortable and were willing to share the info with them as a friend and say, hey, what can we do about this? Can we fix this ourselves, or do you guys need to come in? So it's things like that. Sorry, that was a big aside. So let me
No, those are
second.
Great stories.
I have two more critical behaviors. Yeah, I have two more critical behaviors that are really common. One, so we call it empowerment, collaboration or teamwork, communications, and then two more. One that ties them all together is care. And this is, again, this idea they need to believe you care about them, right? And one of the things that I think is interesting about that is a lot of leaders think, hey, they work for me, they have to earn my trust, and that you get trust and respect. It's the other way around. As a leader, in the worst case, if someone breaks your trust, you have the stick. You have all the formal mechanisms to change things. You have to give the trust to begin with and give the respect, and you're the one who has to earn it. And a lot of times when things aren't going well or the way that you want them to go, it's because you actually don't have the trust of the people under you that you're going to have their best interests at heart, that you care about them, that you give a crap about them, that you know. And if you're not on the floor, don't know anything about them or communicating with them or aren't their advocate pushing upstream, it can be really difficult. The big difference between what I would say is okay managers and great pride building managers that I see is when we go and we interview trying to find who the pride builders are at the front line or even the next few levels up, we ask them, what's your job? The regular manager says, I run this unit. I manage these operations. I'm responsible for this output. All the pride builders, none of them say that. My job is to help, get the best out of these people who are here for a short period of time and to enable them to move up in the organization, make sure it's fulfilling to them, and make sure that the work that they're doing ties to things that are important to them so that they have purpose in their work and they can have pride in their work and things like that. So it's a very different answer, and it's a huge differentiator. And it's those people who will like go through a brick wall for a supervisor and go above and beyond and things like that. We see it over and over again.
Amazing. I mean, this is really, really good, Chad. When dealing with companies that, of course, bring you in to deal with these kinds of things, there's often people that say, what are the quantitative results? Because all this feels very tenuous. It's soft. It's culture. Yeah, it's a great story. Ops, maintenance, they're getting together. Does it tie into, hey, we've had fewer safety incidents. Hey, we've had better productivity and output. Hey, we've seen customer satisfaction increase. How do you sort of think about doing attribution? Do you run regression analyses? How do you prove that improving the culture actually results in better business success?
Yeah. So it does take some time, right, to see those changes, but 100%. So first is to make sure we understand what are your business priorities and cultural priorities. So like, what are you actually trying to change? Like, what are you trying to improve? And make sure that there's something that we can measure, right? And then second, we say, what anecdotes do we have? What are stories of success that we have where people are doing things to identify costs that could be changed or find safety things that could be done, right? What actions are being taken? Initially, what small costs are being saved? And then in the end, we say, have we moved the needle on the number of safety days before someone's been hurt, the percentage of safety incidents? Have the costs gone down? At one, refinery, we said, want to work on costs. And the guy said, we don't even know what they cost. So, no one ever brings costs to us. We're only in trouble if the refinery goes down. So if a unit, some compressor is making a noise, we just put in a ticket for a new compressor. We don't even ask someone to fix it first, right? So what they started doing, we said, well, what can we do about this? They said, just put tags on everything what it costs. And then give us a sheet that says what it costs to do a repair on it. And so all of a sudden they look and they say, wow, this compressor is $200,000, right? And so guys started then calling maintenance to say, hey, could we fix this instead of doing it? And then literally they had one guy who was just walking around the plant, frontline guy. And he said, I've just noticed we keep the fans on for the cooling all year. And it's hot here, but there's 4 months a year where we're never over the threshold. Why are the fans on all winter? That was $400,000 like that, right? I'll give you one more example, which is in the case where we had the maintenance guys and the operations guys having breakfast together, the issue that they were, and this was the largest refinery in the United States now. They had issues with downtime. So basically the plant was down, 5% of the time, right? So 5% of the time something broke where they had to stop. And so that's obviously huge, right? But by getting in a preventative mode, they were able to bring plant downtime down to between 1% and 2%. That is, over the course of a year, hundreds of millions of dollars.
How do you sustain success for these clients, given it sounds like it's mostly consulting, project-based? Like, how do they ensure long-term success and guardrails so they don't go veer back into their bad habits?
it's a problem, especially when you have leadership changeover at the top, right? So, but one of the things we do is we try to make sure to fix the communication channel, and we often do what's called an advisory council, and we get a group of frontline supervisors, sometimes frontline employees who aren't supervising anyone, and who are a mix of the motivators, what we call connectors, so people who are connected across. So, we had one guy where if anyone had any question on anything, they went to a frontline one refinery where everyone went to a frontline guy who didn't have anyone under him, but he studied the books of every machine, so he knew what every piece of machinery did in the plant. So everyone went to ask him that. And when we did a survey, we do a survey saying, who do you go to for information? Who do you go to when you need guidance and things like that? And this guy totally spiked. So we have an advisory group where he's on it, some of these master pride builders or motivators, and then what we call some people who are influencers. So they just happen to be at a juncture in the organization where they have a lot of influence. And that would be like someone who is in charge of setting up the maintenance crews and who works with who each week, right? So we put them together, and then we have them on a regular schedule to talk with the leader of the plant. It's worth noting the other thing that advisory councils stress that we can't stress as well is the need for the leader to role model and signal what's important, right? If you don't see from the leader, if they're not walking the walk of what they say is important, no one believes it. One of the best examples of this was at a gold mine in Saudi, and they had a good manager at this gold mine, but they were having safety in problems, and so they were trying to fix safety. And they also say what they call health inspection. It's just cleanliness and everything, because there's a belief that these two kind of go hand in hand. So this group said, do you know what you can do? We believe you care about it, but we have once a month, because we all live on site, where we're doing cleanup. I haven't seen you out there on your hands and knees once. The next month, this manager is out there on his hands and knees, picking up trash, picking up cans. They are taking photos of him. They are hooting and hollering. They are cheering. He got his whole team out there. And then he was like, I'm coming every month, right? That place cleaned up in 2 months. The place was clean, was clean. And then now let's take the safety part. He said, you guys aren't taking safety seriously. And they said, you don't take safety seriously. He said, what do you mean I do? I always got my hard hat out and stuff. He said, well, we're so tight on costs that you don't order PPE, which is the equipment, the hard hats, the earplugs, the steel toe boots, till they get here. So even though the guys aren't working, they're walking around the plant the first 2 weeks with no hard hat, watching us do the work and explain it to them. No hard hat, no PPE. What signal do you think that gets on how serious we are about that stuff? Secondly,
Yeah.
when the royal family comes and you give them tours, do they have to watch the 45-minute safety video before they go? Are they wearing PPE? So they bought a bunch of additional equipment. And then the next time a member of the royal family came, he made them sit through a 45-minute video. And these guys see this guy coming through, not in his robes, but in a blue overalls and a hard hat and earplugs. And they couldn't believe it, right? They're like, oh, crap, we are taking safety seriously now, right? And so in both of those things, these things I'm talking about in terms of how inspection and safety come right through in the numbers, right? It's not surprising. Their safety record improved drastically, right? And in the costs in this other refinery that I mentioned earlier, again, they found in the end, while we were there, over a course of 6 months, they identified, I want to say, 3.5 million of cost savings. So yeah, but it takes some time, and it takes the leadership not agreeing with all the changes, but being willing to what we call suspend judgment. And this, I could see for your purposes, we say, we just need you to suspend judgment and let these things that they're suggesting play out and see if they work. And then you keep the ones that work versus, and also you have to be willing to experiment and not wait till everything's perfect. Show me the exact plans you're going to do before you start. And let me say if I think it's good before you start. You got to just let some of it happen and empower these people.
It all sounds so obvious as a company in the
Right.
space and what we
Right.
do. How did you do the go-to market? Because this all makes sense, but like, how do you find clients, or do they come to you because your role at Katzenbach and you were sort of more mid-level then, and then became senior? Or in your current role, how do you go out and find clients right now to kind of solve these problems?
Yeah. So I haven't done any client development since 2010. I'm just being perfectly honest.
Lucky
so,
you.
so I would look for people as much as for companies. So look for leaders who have take your list of 2,000 companies who have deskless workforces and look for people who you see in the news doing something extraordinary. Look for people who have, for lack of a better word, Herb Keller moments. The guy at Southwest who said, my employees come before customers, and had the barbecues where he'd go around and meet every employee, out on the lawn and things like that. Look for people, who in their own authentic way um, care about people and have that, sense of they need to help people connect the purpose of the work for themselves, um, and to, you know, in at least leaders who have the will, if not the skill. So there's some people who are already doing it, and there's other people who are really hungry for it. The guy at the pension fund I mentioned was really hungry for it. So when he got feedback how he needed to talk differently to people, he made the switch. People wanted to feel trusted. He said, "How can I make you feel trusted?" They said, "Do you know what one little thing would be? Let us dress for our day. We have to come in suits every day. A lot of us don't have client meetings. And it's the idea that you don't trust when we have a client meeting that we're going to dress appropriately. We just want to be told, dress for our day. And we want to see that you start doing that. Because if you wear a suit every day, still people are still going to feel like maybe you don't mean we can dress for our day, and, just be empowered to sort of make that call. And we're all grown ups here. So literally, CEO went to the rest of his manager team, about 10, and be like, everyone needs to change how they dress if they don't have meetings. And here's how we're going to do it. And they took videos, they put up posters. So there's posters everywhere of the CEO in a t-shirt and jeans and doing things where they had only ever seen him in a suit before that. And they also dress for your day. It seems like a tiny little thing, but there was a lot of surprise to it, right? And that was the first of, let's say, 5 other actions that the team took to show that they trusted their employees.
Love the point on people too. It's something we look for. Usually we call them rising stars. So they
Mm-hmm.
almost tend to be actually roughly around the same age as I am in my life at this point, where, and you're not much older, I think, than I am, but they tend to be like the rising stars who've been able to rise up in the organization. They've caught the eye of someone senior that thinks it's worthwhile for them to kind of be running with things, and they hit their business results, but they also care a lot about the people, not as expenses, but as assets and inputs to hit those results. And
100%.
that's a really good point, because if you look at some of the organizations we work with, some are very industry leading, but some kind of might scratch your head and say, huh, they don't maybe strike me. They're large, but they don't strike me as maybe as progressive or forward thinking in terms of how they think about their people. Just going on Glassdoor, looking at the reviews for some of those. But there are people within those organizations that very much champion this kind of thing and see the value and have kind of built up that social equity to pull for something like this. So uh, those are all great points, Chad. Is there anything else you want to say? I know we ran over on time, but this is one of the best episodes we have actually filmed. It is such music to our ears. And, afterwards, after this recording, I'd love to just chat for a few more minutes, because it's this is fantastic. But anything else you want to say?
Sure thing. I appreciate that. I'll leave with one thought, which is that a lot of times when we find leaders have things that they want to change, and they say we need to get people, oftentimes, like to take more accountability or to act like owners or whatever it is, you generally are doing things operationally that are blocking that, versus you don't have people who want to do that. And I also assure you, you have people already doing the things that you want them to do. So it's a matter of finding those people who are already doing it, in spite of the operational things and the formal things in their way, who are going around the rules in order to actually take the accountability you're asking people to take. Find those people and ask them, like, if you do it, why do you do it? And you'll find it's because inherently it's really important to them, right? Like they are attached to the purpose and the work. They found it for themselves. And they can also tell you, what do we need to do? Just like the guys who said, you need to give people time out in the field, right? What do we need to do to start to unlock this for more of the population to do the things that we want to do to get people to do more of it? You already have the people with the answers in your organization. I guarantee it. You just need to connect with them.
Yeah, I mean, after hearing you, I think every organization, pretty much with frontline deskless workers, should have our solution and
I,
and do a lot of what you're saying, kind of replicating those best practices and institutionalizing them, making them sort of the norm that you talked so much about, rather than just a few leaders embodying it and everyone else sort of scratching their head saying, "Oh, what are they actually doing? Let's replicate what they're doing," and then looking at the actual business results. So this is so fantastic, Chad.
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the Frontline Advantage, and it's been very, very helpful.